Hello, guys. So here's the reading on limited government. King Louis XIV of France was a great example of an absolute monarch. His reign was so brilliant, he earned the nickname the Sun King. He ruled France from 1643 to 1715 with complete authority over the entire population of France. He transformed and built an incredibly rich and ornate palace with gardens at Versailles to show off his power, and made all of the French nobles live there just to make sure they obeyed him. With complete control and authority, he could do whatever he wanted, and no one in France could say otherwise. It was good to be the king. Contrast that with the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It is famous for containing and protecting important freedoms such as speech and religion. The First Amendment states that Congress can make no laws that infringe, restrict these freedoms, meaning the First Amendment is a rule for the government, that the government cannot take these rights away. This is a great example of limited government. For Louis XIV, the idea of a rule limiting his power would have been very strange. In contrast, we find it to be common sense. The principle of limited government means that the government is not all-powerful. There are things the government cannot do. This is an incredibly important principle because of the problem of power. Power is the ability, strength, or authority to do things. Power can come in many different forms, such as authority, influence, money, or time. Power is something all human beings need and want. For instance, we all want and deserve to have power over our own lives. But too much power is a bad thing. There's a famous saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is saying that too much power can cause a person, even a good person, to turn bad, and total power over others will definitely turn a person bad. Lord of the Rings is a great analogy here. Everyone wants the One Ring because it has absolute power. But Gandalf, Frodo, Sam, and the Fellowship set out to destroy the One Ring because its power is too much for anyone and turns a person who uses it to evil. So this is the problem of power. We can't trust the government with power, but it needs power to do certain things. What should a government be able to do? Well, according to the Declaration of Independence, government is created to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government needs to have a military to protect American lives and property from enemies, and therefore needs the power to raise money, taxes, in order to have a military. Things like tanks are expensive, and provide services like the National Park Service. But we know that there are some things that the government should not be able to do, like take away rights. How do we make sure the government has the power it needs, but doesn't become corrupt? Great question. There are several ways to limit the power of the government. One way is by writing down the rules that the government has to follow in the form of a constitution and a Bill of Rights. This is called constitutionalism. The U.S. Constitution is the law that the government has to follow. For example, the Fifth Amendment states that the government has to follow due process of law when dealing with a person accused of a crime. That is, law enforcement has to follow specific steps that protect an individual accused of committing a crime. Another way to limit power is through the structure of government. One of the key ideas in organizing the government is dividing power to protect liberty. We recognize that the centralization of power is a bad thing, so we divide the government up into 3 separate branches, each with their own job. The Constitution then gives each branch the ability to limit the power of the other branches. Finally, the national government has to share power with the governments of each state. Power then cannot become concentrated in the hands of one branch or one person because the structure of the government denies power the opportunity to land in the hand of one person or even one branch. One last way to limit power is the very idea of democracy. Popular sovereignty, the people rule. In an autocratic form of government, people serve the government. Democratic governments flip this equation. The government serves the people. The Declaration of Independence states that the governments get their powers from the consent of the governed. The people are the source of the government's power, and the people can take that power back. This is the basic idea of self-government, that the people can rule themselves. However, in order to have self-government, we have to govern ourselves and not govern others. As Abraham Lincoln said, "As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master." This expresses my idea of democracy.